The three college guys thought they were about to pull off the perfect scam: expensive steaks, top-shelf whiskey, and a plan to walk out without paying a dime. What they didn't know was that their quiet, unassuming waitress had just stepped out of the octagon 2 weeks ago after demolishing her opponent in under 90 seconds. Sometimes karma doesn't wait for tomorrow. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The rain hammered against the windows of Copper Creek Steakhouse as Madison Torres wiped down the last table in her section. It was nearly 10 p.m. on a Tuesday, and the restaurant was almost empty except for the kitchen staff cleaning up in the back. Madison had been working double shifts for 3 weeks straight, trying to save enough money to cover her training camp expenses. Her next fight was scheduled for the following month, and every dollar counted. At 26, Madison looked nothing like what most people expected from a professional MMA fighter. She stood 5'6", with an athletic but lean build, her dark hair usually pulled back in a simple ponytail. When she wasn't in fight gear, she preferred comfortable clothes that didn't draw attention. Tonight, she wore the standard black polo and khakis required by Copper Creek, her only distinguishing feature being the small scar above her left eyebrow from a particularly brutal training session 2 years ago. The bell above the front door chimed, and Madison looked up to see 3 young men stumbling in from the rain. They were clearly college-aged, probably around 20 or 21, and just as clearly had been drinking before they arrived. The tallest one, a blonde kid wearing an expensive-looking leather jacket, led the group with the kind of swagger that came from never facing real consequences. His 2 friends followed behind like loyal puppies, one thin and nervous-looking with thick glasses, the other stocky with a buzz cut that made him look like he thought he was tougher than he actually was. "Evening, gentlemen," Madison said, grabbing 3 menus from the hostess stand. "I'm Madison, and I'll be taking care of you tonight, right this way." She led them to a booth in the corner, noting how the leader's eyes lingered on her in a way that made her skin crawl. She'd dealt with enough difficult customers to recognize trouble when she saw it, but the bills weren't going to pay themselves. "What can I start you off with to drink?" she asked, setting the menus down. The blonde one leaned back in his seat, making a show of looking her up and down. Well, well, looks like our luck just changed, boys. What's your name again, sweetheart?" "Madison," she replied evenly, keeping her voice professional despite the warning bells going off in her head. "Madison," he repeated, drawing out each syllable. "Pretty name for a pretty girl. I'm Brad Patterson. My dad owns Patterson Construction. You know, the one building that new shopping center downtown? Maybe you've heard of us?" Madison hadn't, and she didn't care. "What can I get you to drink, Mr. Patterson?" Brad's smile faltered slightly at her lack of recognition or interest. "Right to business, huh? I like that. We'll take 3 of your most expensive whiskeys, top shelf only, and bring us some of those fancy appetizers too, whatever costs the most." His friend with the glasses, who introduced himself as Tyler Webb, shifted uncomfortably. "Brad, maybe we should just get beers. I mean, my parents are already mad about my credit card bill." "Relax, Tyler," Brad said, waving him off. "Tonight's on me. Besides, when have I ever steered you wrong?" The third member of their group, who went by the nickname Tank Morrison, cracked his knuckles and grinned. "That's right. Brad's got this all figured out, don't you, Brad?" Madison caught the exchange of looks between them and felt her guard go up even higher. Something was definitely off about these 3, but she needed the tips. A big order like this could help her make rent with money left over for her protein supplements. "I'll get those drinks started for you," she said, heading back to the bar. As she prepared their order, Madison could hear them whispering and occasionally breaking into loud laughter. The restaurant was nearly empty now, just them, an elderly couple finishing dessert 2 sections over, and the night manager counting receipts in the back office. She'd been working alone for the past hour, since the other servers had clocked out. She returned with their drinks, 3 glasses of 20-year-old Macallan, that cost $45 each and set them down carefully. "Excellent choice," Brad said, taking a sip and making an exaggerated expression of appreciation. "You know, Madison, you've got excellent taste. I bet you're wasted working in a place like this." "What appetizers can I bring you?" Madison asked, steering the conversation back to business. "Surprise us," Brad said with a smirk. "Get us the work. Oysters, that Wagyu beef thing, lobster cocktail, everything. We're celebrating tonight." "What's the occasion?" Madison asked, genuinely curious despite herself. "Let's just say we figured out how to eat like kings without breaking the bank," Tank said, earning sharp looks from his friends. "Shut up, Tank," Tyler hissed, but Brad just laughed. "Don't mind him," Brad said smoothly. "We just came into some good fortune recently. Family business, you know how it is." Madison nodded and headed to the kitchen to place their order. Something about their behavior was setting off every instinct she'd developed from years of reading opponents in the cage. There was a predatory quality to the way they watched her move, like they were sizing her up for something. But she pushed the feeling aside and focused on doing her job. The next hour passed in a blur of expensive food and drinks. Brad's table ran up a bill that exceeded $300, ordering dish after dish and bottle after bottle of premium wine to go with their steaks. They were getting louder and more obnoxious with each drink, making crude jokes and speaking to Madison in increasingly inappropriate ways. "You know what, Madison?" Brad said as she cleared their dessert plates. "You should come party with us after you get off work. We're heading to this exclusive club downtown, the kind of place where someone like you could meet some very important people." "I appreciate the offer, but I have an early morning," Madison replied politely. "Come on," Tank chimed in, his words slightly slurred. "Don't be like that. We're trying to show you a good time here. We could really take care of you," Brad added, his meaning unmistakable. "I mean, look at this bill, $350 plus tip. That's probably more than you make in a week at this dump." Madison felt her jaw tighten, but she maintained her composure. "Will there be anything else tonight, gentlemen?" "Just the check, sweetheart," Brad said, leaning back with a satisfied grin. "And don't worry about rushing. We're enjoying the view." Madison walked to the computer terminal and printed their bill, her mind already calculating the tip she hoped to receive. 15% would be over $50, enough to cover her gym membership for the month. 20% would be even better. She brought the check over in the small leather folder and set it on the table. "Take your time," she said. "I'll be right over there when you're ready." She busied herself with cleaning nearby tables, trying not to eavesdrop on their hushed conversation. But she couldn't help noticing the way they kept looking at her and whispering among themselves. Tyler seemed increasingly agitated, while Tank appeared to be having second thoughts about whatever they were planning. "I don't know about this, Brad," she heard Tyler say. "What if she calls the cops?" "She's not going to call anyone," Brad replied confidently. "Trust me, I've got this handled. Besides, what's she going to say? 3 college guys ate dinner and left? There's no law against that." "But the bill." "The bill is their problem, not ours. Look around, Tyler. This place is dead. It's our word against hers, and who do you think people are going to believe? 3 respectable college students or some minimum wage waitress trying to scam customers?" Madison's blood began to simmer as the pieces fell into place. They were planning to dine and dash, leaving her responsible for their massive bill. In restaurants like Copper Creek, servers were often held liable for unpaid checks, especially if management suspected they were in on it somehow. She'd heard stories of waitresses having entire paychecks garnished to cover walkouts. She walked back to their table with a forced smile. "How are we doing over here? Any questions about the check?" Brad looked up at her with mock innocence. "Actually, Madison, we just realized we have a bit of a problem. See, Tyler here left his wallet at his dorm, and Tank's card got declined. But don't worry, I've got a solution. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card, sliding it across the table to her. "That's my father's company, Patterson Construction. Just call that number tomorrow and tell them Brad Patterson said to put tonight's dinner on the company account. They'll take care of everything." Madison picked up the card and examined it. It looked professional enough, but something about the whole situation felt wrong. "I'm sorry, but we don't do billing arrangements like that. Payment is required before you leave tonight." Brad's friendly facade slipped for just a moment, revealing something cold and calculating underneath. "Look, sweetheart, I'm trying to be nice here. My family has money, real money, but these corporate accounts take time to process. Surely a smart girl like you can understand that." "I understand," Madison said slowly, "but our policy is clear. Payment is due at the time of service." "What exactly are you suggesting?" Brad asked, his voice taking on an edge. "That we're trying to rip you off? Do you have any idea who you're talking to?" Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The elderly couple at the other table had finished their dessert and left, leaving Madison completely alone with the three young men. The kitchen staff were in the back, and the manager was in his office with the door closed. She was on her own. "I'm not suggesting anything," Madison said calmly. "I'm simply explaining our payment policy. We accept cash, credit, or debit cards." Tank shifted in his seat, cracking his knuckles again. "You know what? I don't like your attitude, waitress. We're good customers who spent a lot of money here tonight, and you're acting like we're criminals or something." "Nobody's acting like anything," Madison replied, but she could feel the situation escalating. Her training kicked in automatically. She noted the positions of all three men, the distance to the nearest exit, the weight and balance of the plates and glasses within reach. "I just need payment for your meal." Brad stood up slowly, his full height making him tower over Madison by nearly 6 inches. "Here's what's going to happen. We're going to walk out of here, and you're going to pretend this conversation never happened. Because if you try to cause problems for us, you're going to find out that some people in this town have connections you don't want to mess with." "Sit down," Madison said quietly. "Excuse me?" Brad asked, clearly not expecting resistance. "I said sit down." Madison's voice remained calm, but there was something in her tone that made Tyler shift nervously in his seat. Brad laughed, but it sounded forced. "Or what? You're going to make me. Listen, honey, I don't know what kind of tough girl act you think you're pulling here, but—" $357.43, Madison interrupted. "That's what you owe, plus 20% gratuity for parties of 3 or more, which brings your total to $428.92. "We're not paying," Tank said, standing up beside Brad. "What part of that? Don't you understand?" Madison looked at each of them in turn, her expression unreadable. She'd been in situations like this before, not in restaurants, but in training, in fights, in the moments before violence erupted. She recognized the smell of it in the air, the way tension coiled like a spring about to snap. "You ordered the food," she said simply. "You ate the food, you drank the alcohol, now you pay for it. That's how this works." "Not tonight, it isn't," Brad said, moving closer to her. "See, we've done our research on this place. They're struggling financially. The owner's behind on his loan payments. The last thing they need is bad publicity about their staff harassing customers. So here's what's going to happen. We're going to leave, and you're going to learn an important lesson about knowing your place." "And if the manager asks what happened to the money," Madison asked. Brad shrugged. "Tell him 3 college kids stiffed you. Tell him whatever you want. Just make sure you don't mention any names because, trust me, you don't want us as enemies." Tyler finally found his voice. "Brad, maybe we should just pay. I mean, my dad gave me money for emergencies and—" "Shut up, Tyler," Brad snapped. "We're doing this my way. Besides, it's not about the money anymore. It's about respect. This waitress needs to learn some manners." Madison felt something cold settle in her chest. She'd spent years training for moments like this, not exactly like this, but close enough. Moments when someone tried to intimidate her, to make her back down, to make her feel small and powerless. The difference was that in the cage, there were rules, there were referees, there were weight classes and drug tests and medical clearances. Here, there were no rules at all. "Last chance," she said quietly. "Pay your bill and leave quietly, or deal with the consequences." Brad actually laughed out loud. "Consequences? From you? What are you going to do? Give us bad service next time?" He turned to his friends with a smirk. "Can you believe this? She actually thinks she can threaten us." That's when Madison made her decision. She reached behind the register counter and pressed the silent alarm that would alert the police to a robbery in progress. But she knew it would take at least 10 minutes for them to arrive, and she had a feeling these three weren't planning to wait around that long. "You know what?" Brad said, pulling out his phone. "I think I'm going to record this. My followers are going to love watching some nobody waitress try to act tough. This is going to go viral." He started filming as Madison stood perfectly still, her hands at her sides, her breathing controlled and steady. She looked smaller than ever in her simple work uniform, but there was something about her posture that should have warned them. The way she balanced on the balls of her feet, the way her shoulders relaxed even as her core tightened, the way her eyes never left Brad's hands. "Come on, tough girl," Tank taunted, moving to flank her on the left side. "Show us what you've got." Madison smiled then, and for the first time all night it was completely genuine. "Okay," she said simply, and that's when everything changed. What happened next took less than 15 seconds, but it felt like slow motion to everyone in the room. Tank lunged first, his meaty fists swinging toward Madison's face in a wild haymaker that telegraphed from 3 feet away. Madison shifted her weight, let his momentum carry him past her, and drove her elbow into his kidney with surgical precision. The impact sent him stumbling into a nearby table, chairs scattering as he clutched his side and gasped for breath. Brad's phone clattered to the floor as he watched his friend go down. "Oh, what the hell?" He didn't get to finish the sentence. Madison had already pivoted, her left hand shooting out to grab his wrist as he reached for her. She twisted his arm behind his back in one fluid motion, applying just enough pressure to make him yelp in pain without breaking anything. Yet. "Tyler, call the cops!" Brad shouted, but Tyler was frozen in place, his face pale behind his thick glasses. "The cops are already on their way," Madison said calmly, maintaining her grip on Brad's arm. "Silent alarm. They should be here in about 8 minutes. Tank had recovered enough to charge again, this time with more purpose. He was bigger than Madison by at least 60 pounds, and he clearly thought that would be enough. He wrapped his arms around her waist from behind, trying to lift her off the ground in a bear hug. Madison dropped her center of gravity, making herself heavier and harder to lift. Then she drove her heel down hard on his instep, while simultaneously throwing her head back into his nose. The combination broke his grip and sent him stumbling backward with blood streaming down his face. "My nose!" he howled. "She broke my nose!" "It's not broken," Madison said matter-of-factly, still holding Brad's arm. "But it will be if you try that again." Brad was struggling against her grip, his face red with rage and embarrassment. "Let go of me, you psycho. We'll sue you for assault. My father will—" Madison applied a little more pressure to his wrist, cutting off his threats. "Your father will do what? Explain to the police why his son tried to steal $400 worth of food." That's when the restaurant manager, Dave Hernandez, finally emerged from his office. A short, stocky man in his 50s with graying hair and tired eyes, Dave had been running Copper Creek for nearly a decade. He'd seen his share of difficult customers, but nothing quite like this. "What in God's name is going on out here?" he demanded, taking in the scene of overturned chairs, Tank's bloody nose, and Madison restraining Brad. These three tried to dine and dash, Madison explained, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. They ran up a $400 tab and refused to pay. When I insisted, they became aggressive. Dave's eyes widened as he looked at the devastation around them. "Madison, what did you do?" "I defended myself," she replied simply. Tank was still holding his nose, blood seeping between his fingers. "She attacked us. We were just trying to leave and she went crazy." "I need an ambulance." "You need a tissue," Madison corrected, "and a reality check." Tyler finally found his voice, though it came out as a shaky whisper. "Brad, maybe we should just pay. This is getting out of hand." "Shut up, Tyler," Brad snapped. "We're not paying anything. This is assault, and we're pressing charges." Dave looked at Madison with a mixture of concern and confusion. In all the years he'd known her, she'd never caused trouble. She was one of his most reliable employees, always on time, never complained, and handled difficult customers with grace. But the evidence of what had just happened was scattered all around them. "Madison, I'm going to need you to let him go," Dave said carefully. "I will when the police arrive," Madison replied. "These three are flight risks." "Flight risks?" Brad laughed bitterly. "We're college students, not criminals." "You're thieves," Madison corrected, "and liars and bullies who picked the wrong target." The sound of sirens in the distance made everyone freeze. Tank's eyes went wide, and Tyler looked like he might throw up. Even Brad's bravado seemed to falter slightly. "Look," he said, his voice taking on a desperate edge. "Maybe we can work. Something out here. I mean, nobody got seriously hurt, right? We could just forget this whole thing happened." "You mean pay your bill?" Madison asked. "I mean, yes, fine, we'll pay the bill. But you have to promise not to press charges for assault." Madison almost smiled. "I'm not the one who committed assault. You three are." The police sirens were getting closer now, and Dave was looking increasingly nervous. Bad publicity was the last thing Copper Creek needed, especially with their financial situation already precarious. "Madison," he said quietly, "maybe we should consider their offer. I mean, if they pay the bill and leave quietly." "Dave, they threatened me," Madison said, her voice firm. "They tried to intimidate me into letting them steal from us. And when that didn't work, they got physical." "She's lying," Tank protested, though his voice was muffled by the towel someone had given him for his nose. "We never touched her." "Your friend's bloody nose suggests otherwise," Madison pointed out. Tyler was shifting from foot to foot, looking like he wanted to be anywhere else in the world. "Brad, I told you this was a stupid idea. I told you we should have just paid from the beginning. Tyler, I swear to God, if you don't shut up—" "No!" Tyler suddenly exploded, his pent-up anxiety finally boiling over. "I'm tired of your stupid schemes. First the fake IDs, then the credit card thing, now this. I'm not going to jail because you can't afford to pay for dinner." The restaurant fell silent, except for the approaching sirens. Brad stared at his friend in shock, realizing that Tyler had just destroyed any chance they had of talking their way out of this. "Tyler," he said slowly, "you just made a very big mistake." "The only mistake I made was listening to you in the first place," Tyler shot back. "My parents are gonna kill me, but at least I'll still have a future. Unlike you." 2. Police cruisers pulled into the parking lot, their red and blue lights painting the restaurant windows in alternating colors. Madison finally released Brad's arm, but she stayed close enough to grab him again if he tried to run. "Remember," she said quietly, "you brought this on yourselves." Officer Sarah Chen was the first through the door, followed closely by her partner, Officer Marcus Rodriguez. Both were veterans of the force who'd seen enough bar fights and domestic disputes to recognize the aftermath of violence when they saw it. "We got a silent alarm," Officer Chen announced, her hand resting on her service weapon. "Everyone stay where you are and keep your hands visible." Dave stepped forward, his manager's instincts kicking in despite the chaos. "Officers, I'm Dave Hernandez, the manager here. We had a situation with some customers who refused to pay their bill. Officer Rodriguez was already assessing the scene. The overturned furniture, Tank's bloody nose, the obvious tension in the room. "Anyone need medical attention?" "Just him," Madison said, nodding toward Tank. "Broken nose, but he'll live." "She assaulted us," Brad immediately protested. "We were just trying to leave, and she attacked us for no reason." Officer Chen pulled out her notepad. "Let's start from the beginning. Who wants to tell me what happened here?" Madison stepped forward. "I'm Madison Torres. I was serving these 3 customers when they informed me they had no intention of paying their bill. When I refused to let them leave without paying, they became threatening and aggressive. I defended myself." "That's not what happened," Tank protested through his swollen nose. "She's some kind of psycho. Look what she did to my face." Officer Rodriguez examined Tank's injury with professional detachment. "This doesn't look like an unprovoked attack. Looks more like defensive wounds. How exactly did this happen?" Tank's confidence wavered. I was just trying to calm her down and she went crazy on me." "Calm her down? How?" Officer Chen asked pointedly. The question hung in the air as Tank realized he'd walked into a trap. If he admitted to grabbing Madison, he'd be admitting to assault. If he lied and said he never touched her, it would be harder to explain his injuries. Tyler, meanwhile, was looking more and more like he wanted to disappear into the floor. "Officer, I think there's been a misunderstanding. We were just trying to work out a payment arrangement and things got out of hand." "What kind of payment arrangement?" Officer Rodriguez asked. Tyler glanced nervously at Brad, who was glaring at him with undisguised fury. "Well, we were going to pay tomorrow through Brad's dad's company account. But you had no actual authorization to do that, did you?" Officer Chen pressed. "Not exactly," Tyler admitted quietly. Madison spoke up again. "Officer, I have their entire conversation on the security cameras. They planned this from the moment they walked in. They ordered the most expensive items on the menu with no intention of paying, then tried to intimidate me when I wouldn't let them leave." Dave nodded reluctantly. "We do have cameras. I can pull up the footage if you need it." Brad's face went pale as he realized the full implications of what Madison had just said. Security cameras meant evidence. Evidence meant prosecution. Prosecution meant his father finding out, and that was a conversation he'd been dreading for months. "Look," he said, his voice taking on a pleading tone. "This is all just a big misunderstanding. We're college students, not criminals. We made a mistake, but we're willing to make it right. We'll pay the bill, cover any damages, whatever you need." Officer Chen looked at Madison. "Ma'am, what would you like to see happen here?" Madison considered the question carefully. Part of her wanted to see these 3 face the full consequences of their actions. They'd tried to steal from her, threatened her, and then gotten physical when she stood up to them. But another part of her, the part that understood what it was like to make mistakes when you were young and stupid, wondered if there might be a better way to handle this. "I want them to pay their bill," she said finally. "All of it, including the 20% gratuity. I want them to pay for any damages to the restaurant. And I want them to understand that actions have consequences." "And if they do all that?" Officer Rodriguez asked. Madison looked at each of the 3 young men in turn. Brad with his expensive clothes and entitled attitude, Tank with his bloody nose and wounded pride, Tyler with his obvious regret and fear. "Then maybe we can all learn something from this," she said. But even as she spoke the words, she could see in Brad's eyes that he hadn't learned anything at all. He was already planning his next move, already figuring out how to spin this story to his advantage. Some people, Madison realized, only understood one kind of lesson, and sometimes that lesson had to be delivered with force. Officer Chen was reviewing the security footage on Dave's computer when everything took an unexpected turn. The grainy black and white images clearly showed the 3 young men's behavior throughout the evening. their aggressive posturing, Tank's attempt to grab Madison, and her precise defensive responses. "This is pretty clear-cut," Officer Rodriguez said, watching Tank charge at Madison on the screen. "Self-defense all the way." Brad was pacing near the front of the restaurant, his phone pressed to his ear. "Dad, I need you to listen to me carefully. There's been a situation at a restaurant, and I need you to call our lawyer. Now." Madison overheard the conversation and felt a familiar knot form in her stomach. Rich kids with connected parents. She'd dealt with their type before. They thought money could solve any problem, erase any mistake. Sometimes they were right. Tyler had pulled out his wallet and was counting bills with shaking hands. "I have about $200 in cash," he said to Dave, "and my debit card should cover the rest. Please, I just want to pay and go home." "Tyler, don't you dare pay a cent," Brad hissed, covering his phone. "My father's lawyer is going to tear this place apart. We'll own this dump by the time we're done." "I don't want to own anything," Tyler replied miserably. "I just want this nightmare to end." Tank had finally stopped bleeding and was examining his reflection in his phone camera. His nose was swollen and discolored, but Madison had been right. It wasn't broken. "I look like I got hit by a truck," he muttered. "You got hit by someone who knew what she was doing," Officer Chen observed. "Ma'am, can I ask about your background? That was some pretty impressive defensive work." Madison hesitated. She'd hoped to keep her fighting career out of this, but the question was direct. "I'm an MMA fighter, professional. I compete in the women's flyweight division." The restaurant went dead silent. Even Brad stopped his phone call and stared at her. "MMA?" Dave asked, his voice filled with disbelief. "Madison, you never mentioned... you've been working here for 2 years." "It doesn't pay the bills," Madison replied simply. "Not yet, anyway. Most fighters have day jobs until they make it to the big leagues." Tank's face went pale as the implication sank in. "You're a professional fighter? And you didn't think to mention that before you broke my nose?" "I didn't break your nose," Madison corrected. "And you didn't ask about my hobbies before you tried to assault me?" Officer Rodriguez was looking at Madison with new respect. "What's your record?" 12-2, Madison said, a hint of pride creeping into her voice. "Both losses were split, decisions that could have gone either way. I'm ranked 4th in my division regionally." 12-2, Officer Chen repeated, shaking her head. "Gentlemen, do you have any idea how lucky you are that she showed restraint?" Brad ended his phone call and approached the group with renewed confidence. "Actually, this changes everything. A professional fighter attacking civilians? That's assault, with a deadly weapon in some jurisdictions. My father's lawyer says we have a slam-dunk case." Madison felt her temper flare, but she kept her voice level. "Your father's lawyer might want to review the security footage before making any promises." "Oh, we will," Brad said with a smirk. "And when we're done, you'll be facing criminal charges and a civil lawsuit that'll take everything you have. Hope that 12-2 records was worth it." Officer Chen stepped between them. "Mr. Patterson, I suggest you lower your voice and reconsider your position. The footage clearly shows your friends initiating physical contact. Your MMA background doesn't make you guilty of assault when you're defending yourself against multiple attackers." "Multiple attackers," Tank protested. "I never attacked anyone. I was trying to restrain her." "Without consent, after she'd already told you to leave her alone," Officer Rodriguez pointed out. "That's still assault, son." Tyler had finished counting his money and was looking increasingly desperate. "Brad, please, let's just pay and leave. My scholarship is at stake here. If the university finds out I was arrested..." "Nobody's getting arrested if we handle this right," Brad insisted. "But we're not paying extortion money to some waitress with anger management issues." That's when Dave's phone rang. He glanced at the caller ID and winced. "It's the owner," he said to no one in particular. "Dave, what's this I'm hearing about police cars at the restaurant? The voice on the other end was loud enough for everyone to hear. Dave moved away from the group, but his conversation was still audible. "Mr. Castellanos, we had an incident with some customers who refused to pay their bill. It's under control now." Under control? I just got a call from some hotshot lawyer threatening to sue us into bankruptcy. What the hell happened over there? Madison watched Brad's smug expression grow even more pronounced. His father had apparently wasted no time making threatening phone calls. "The customer tried to leave without paying," Dave explained. "Madison handled the situation, and the police are here now." "Madison, the quiet girl who works doubles, what did she do? Call them names." Dave glanced over at Madison, then at Tank's swollen nose. "It's complicated, Mr. Castellanos. Uncomplicated fast, because if this lawsuit bankrupts us, you're all out of jobs." The call ended and Dave looked like he'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. Madison could see the calculations running through his head. The restaurant's precarious, finances, the threat of a lawsuit, the pressure to make this go away quietly. "Madison," Dave said carefully, "maybe we should consider what Mr. Patterson is proposing." "Which is what exactly?" Madison asked, though she could already guess. "Drop this whole thing. They pay their bill. We all forget it happened. Nobody impresses charges." "Dave, they assaulted me," Madison said quietly, "after trying to steal from us. You're asking me to pretend that didn't happen?" "I'm asking you to be practical," Dave replied. "These people have money and lawyers. We have insurance. Premiums and loan payments. Sometimes you have to pick your battles." Madison looked around the restaurant, at the overturned chairs, at Tank's bloody tissues on the floor, at Tyler's guilty expression, and Brad's triumphant smirk. This was exactly the kind of situation she'd spent years training to handle, both in the gym and in life. But she'd never imagined that the biggest fight would come after the physical confrontation was over. "Officer Chen," she said, "what happens if I press charges?" "Based on the security footage and witness statements, we'd arrest all three of them for theft of services and assault," the officer replied. "They'd be processed, arraigned, and released on bail pending trial." "And if I don't press charges?" "Then it becomes a civil matter. They pay their bill and everyone goes home." Brad stepped forward eagerly. "That's all we want, to pay our bill and put this behind us. No hard feelings." Madison studied his face, seeing the calculation behind his false sincerity. He wasn't sorry, he wasn't ashamed. He was simply maneuvering to minimize consequences, already planning how to spin this story to his friends. $428.92, she said finally, plus damages to the restaurant furniture, plus my medical expenses if I need to see a doctor about any injuries. "Medical expenses?" Tank scoffed. "You're not injured." "Adrenaline's a funny thing," Madison replied. "Sometimes you don't feel the pain until later. I might need to see my sports medicine doctor just to be safe. That's about $300. Brad's confident expression faltered slightly. "Now you're just making things up." "Am I?" "Officer Rodriguez, don't assault victims often require medical attention even after minor alterations?" "It's not uncommon," the officer confirmed. "Shock, delayed pain response, precautionary examinations. All legitimate medical expenses." Tyler was frantically calculating numbers on his phone. "That's over $700 total. I don't have that much." "Then you should have thought of that before you decided to dine and dash," Madison said. Simply, the standoff continued for several long moments, with everyone waiting to see who would blink first. Madison could feel the weight of multiple agendas pressing down on her. Dave's financial fears, the officer's desire to resolve the situation peacefully, Tyler's desperation to avoid criminal charges, and Brad's entitled assumption that money could fix anything. But she also felt something else, the quiet confidence that came from knowing she'd done nothing wrong. She'd worked hard, served her customers professionally, and defended herself when threatened. Now these three wanted her to pretend none of that mattered because they had rich parents and expensive lawyers. Madison Torres had been underestimated her entire life. Too small to be a serious fighter, too quiet to be management material, too poor to matter in the grand scheme of things. But she'd built her career on proving people wrong, one fight at a time. "I'll tell you what," she said finally, her voice carrying a note of steel that made everyone in the room pay attention. "I'm going to give you a choice, the same choice you gave me an hour ago." She looked directly at Brad, her dark eyes unflinching. "Pay what you owe, apologize for your behavior, and walk away, or face the consequences of your actions." The restaurant fell silent, except for the hum of the refrigeration units in the kitchen. Everyone was waiting for Brad's response, but Madison already knew what it would be. Some people only understood one language, and she was fluent in it. Brad's phone buzzed with a text message, and his expression shifted from arrogant confidence to something approaching panic as he read it. Without a word, he stepped away from the group and made another call. "Dad, did you really just... But I thought you said the lawyer would..." His voice trailed off as he listened to whatever his father was telling him. The color drained from his face. "No, Dad, please don't. I can handle this myself." Madison watched the conversation with growing curiosity. Whatever Brad's father was saying, it wasn't what his son had expected to hear. Tyler noticed the change too. "Brad, what's wrong? What did your dad say?" Brad ended the call and stared at his phone for a long moment before looking up at the group. His earlier bravado had completely evaporated. "My father just fired me," he said quietly. The restaurant fell silent except for the soft jazz music still playing over the speakers. Even Officer Chen looked surprised by this development. "What do you mean, fired you?" Tank asked. "I mean, he looked up this place online while he was on the phone with his lawyer," Brad replied, his voice hollow. "Turns out Copper Creek Steakhouse is owned by Vincent Castellanos." Dave's eyes widened. "You know Mr. Castellanos? My dad's been trying to get a construction contract with his development company for 3 years, Brad continued. It would be the biggest job Patterson Construction has ever landed, and I just destroyed any chance of that happening." The implications hit everyone at once. Brad hadn't just picked a random restaurant to scam, he'd accidentally targeted a business owned by someone his father desperately needed to impress. "Oh God," Tyler whispered. "Brad, you said you researched this place." "I researched their financial situation," Brad snapped. "I didn't research who owned it. How was I supposed to know?" Madison found herself almost feeling sorry for him. Almost. "So what did your father tell you to do?" Brad looked at her with something that might have been respect for the first time all evening. "He told me to pay the bill, apologize to everyone involved, and pray that Mr. Castellanos doesn't decide to hold this against Patterson Construction. And if Mr. Castellanos does hold it against your father's company," Officer Rodriguez asked, "then my dad loses the biggest opportunity of his career, and it's my fault," Brad replied miserably. "He also said if I ever pull another stunt like this, I'm cut off completely. No more allowance, no more college tuition, no more trust fund." Tank was staring at his friend in disbelief. "You mean we're actually going to pay?" "We're going to pay, we're going to apologize, and then we're going to hope this doesn't ruin my family's business," Brad said firmly. "Tyler, how much do you have?" Tyler checked his wallet again. $237. "Tank?" Tank reluctantly pulled out his wallet. "Maybe $80. I wasn't planning on actually paying for anything tonight." Brad did some quick math. "That's only $317. We're still short." "How short?" Madison asked, though she'd already calculated it herself. "About $400, including the damages and medical expenses you mentioned." Madison studied Brad's face, looking for any sign that this was another manipulation, but his defeat seemed genuine. The entitled rich kid who'd walked in 2 hours ago had been replaced by someone who'd just realized that actions really did have consequences. "I have a proposition," she said finally. "What kind of proposition?" Officer Chen asked. Madison looked around the room, at the overturned furniture, at Dave's worried expression, at Tyler's obvious relief that they might actually pay, at Tank's still swollen nose. "I'll waive the medical expenses and reduce the damages to the cost of the meal only," she said. "But I have conditions." "What conditions?" Brad asked warily. "First, you pay the full bill, including the 20% gratuity. Second, you each write a formal apology letter to Mr. Castellanos, explaining what happened and taking full responsibility. Third, you perform 20 hours of community service at a local charity." "Community service?" Tank protested. "We're not criminals. You tried to steal $400 worth of food and then assaulted a woman half your size," Officer Rodriguez pointed out. "In most jurisdictions, that would make you criminals." Tyler was nodding eagerly. "I'll do it. I'll do whatever you want. 20 hours, 40 hours, whatever." Brad was silent for a long moment, clearly weighing his options. Finally, he sighed. "What kind of community service?" "There's a youth center downtown that teaches self-defense classes to kids from rough neighborhoods," Madison said. "They're always looking for volunteers to help with equipment maintenance, cleaning, basic administrative work." "You want us to work at a gym?" Tank asked incredulously. "I want you to see what it looks like when people actually work for what they have," Madison replied. "These kids don't have trust funds or daddy's credit cards. They show up every day after school and learn discipline, respect, and how to defend themselves. Maybe you'll learn something too." Dave was looking at Madison with newfound admiration. "That's actually a pretty good solution. It's better than they deserve," Officer Chen added, "but it might teach them something useful." Brad pulled out his phone and opened his banking app. "I can transfer the money right now if the restaurant takes electronic payments." "We do," Dave confirmed, pulling out the card reader. As Brad processed the payment, Tyler spoke up. "Madison, can I ask you something?" "Sure." "When you first grabbed Brad's arm, you could have really hurt him, couldn't you? I mean, with your training and all." Madison considered the question. "Yes, but you didn't. Why not?" "Because hurting people isn't the goal," Madison said simply. "Control is the goal. Neutralizing threats is the goal. Hurting people is just sometimes necessary to achieve those goals." Tank touched his nose gingerly. "So you were going easy on us?" "I was using appropriate force for the situation," Madison corrected. "If you'd had weapons, or if there had been more of you, or if you'd actually managed to hurt me, the response would have been different." The payment went through, and Dave printed out a receipt. Brad signed it with a grimace, probably realizing that this was the most expensive meal of his life. "So, what happens now?" Tyler asked. Officer Chen looked at Madison. "That's up to Ms. Torres. Are you satisfied with this resolution?" Madison looked at each of the three young men. Tyler seemed genuinely remorseful and eager to make amends. Tank was sulking, but appeared to understand the seriousness of what had happened. Brad was harder to read. His defeat seemed real, but she wondered if it came from genuine remorse or just fear of disappointing his father. "I want to see the apology letters before you send them," she said. "And I want confirmation from the youth center that you've completed your community service hours. All of you." "You don't trust us?" Brad asked. "You tried to steal from me 2 hours ago," Madison pointed out. "Trust is earned." Dave handed Madison an envelope containing her tip money, nearly $90, which was more than she usually made in an entire shift. "Madison, I owe you an apology too. I should have backed you up from the beginning instead of worrying about the restaurant's liability." "You were doing your job," Madison replied. "I understand the position you were in." "No," Dave said firmly. My job is to protect my employees, not throw them under the bus to avoid problems. I won't make that mistake again. Officer Rodriguez was packing up his notepad. Well, this turned out better than most of these situations do. Everybody learned. Something nobody went to jail, and justice was served. Justice, Tank muttered. We paid for overpriced food and got beat up by a waitress. You paid for food you ate, Officer Chen corrected, and you got a valuable lesson in not underestimating people based on appearances. I'd call that a bargain. As the officers prepared to leave, Brad approached Madison one more time. Can I ask you something? Go ahead. How did you know I was bluffing about my father's connections, I mean? Madison smiled slightly. I've been underestimated my entire life because of how I look, where I come from, what I do for work. I've learned to recognize when someone is trying to intimidate me with borrowed power instead of real strength. And if I had been telling the truth, if my father really could have made problems for you, then I would have dealt with those problems. When they came, Madison said, some things are worth fighting for, regardless of the cost. Brad nodded slowly, and for the first time all evening, he looked like he might actually be learning something. Come on, he said to his friends. Let's get out of here before we embarrass ourselves any further. As the three young men headed for the door, Tyler turned back one more time. Madison, thank you for giving us a second chance. I know we didn't deserve it. Everyone deserves a second chance, Madison replied. What matters is what you do with it. The door closed behind them, leaving Madison alone with Dave and the scattered remnants of the evening's chaos. The restaurant seemed unnaturally quiet after all the excitement. Well, Dave said, surveying the overturned furniture, that's definitely going in my report to corporate. Madison started picking up chairs and straightening tables. Think Mr. Castellanos will be upset? Are you kidding when he hears how you handled 3 troublemakers without calling for backup, dealt with a potential lawsuit, and turned the whole thing into a community service project? Dave grinned. He's probably going to give you a raise. As Madison continued cleaning up, she couldn't help but smile. It had been one hell of a night, but sometimes the best victories came from the fights you never expected to have. 3 weeks later, Madison was warming up in the back room of Phoenix Youth Center when she heard familiar voices coming from the main gym area. She peered through the doorway and spotted Tyler Webb mopping the floors, while Tank Morrison was stacking wrestling mats in the corner. Both looked significantly different than they had that night at the restaurant, humbler, more focused, actually working instead of just going through the motions. Where's the third one? Asked Marcus. Williams, the youth center's director, a former heavyweight boxer who turned to coaching after a career-ending injury, Marcus ran the facility with the kind of firm but fair approach that had helped hundreds of kids over the years. Brad Patterson is in the office doing data entry, Madison replied. Apparently he's actually good with computers when he applies himself. Marcus chuckled. Who would have thought? When you first brought them here, I figured they'd last maybe 2 days before finding some excuse to quit. Tyler and Tank have surprised me, Madison admitted. Tyler especially. He's been here every day after classes, and some of the younger kids have really taken to him. Through the doorway, they could see Tyler patiently showing a 10-year-old girl how to properly wrap her hands before training. His natural nervousness seemed to disappear when he was helping others, replaced by genuine enthusiasm and care. And Tank? Marcus asked. Madison's expression was more complicated. He's doing the work, but I'm not sure he's learned the lesson yet. He still thinks this is all some cosmic injustice rather than consequences for his choices. As if summoned by their conversation, Tank appeared in the doorway. His nose had healed completely, though it was slightly crooked now, a permanent reminder of that night. He was carrying a stack of equipment that needed to be stored in the back room. Madison, he said with obvious reluctance. Marcus wants me to ask if you need any help setting up for tonight's advanced class. Sure. Madison replied. "You can help me move the heavy bags back into position." As they worked together in awkward silence, Tank finally spoke up. "Can I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "That night at the restaurant, if we had actually hurt you, what would you have done?" Madison paused in her work, considering how to answer. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you held back. We all know that now. But if we had actually been dangerous, if we had weapons or something, would you have seriously injured us?" "Tank, that's not the right question," Madison said, adjusting the height of a heavy bag. "The right question is, why did you put yourself in a position where violence was even necessary?" "Because we were stupid and entitled and thought we could get away with it," Tank replied, surprising her with his honesty. "That's a start," Madison said, "but go deeper. Why did you think you could get away with it?" Tank was quiet for a long moment, actually thinking about the question. Because nothing bad had ever happened to us before. Because we'd always been able to talk our way out of trouble or have our parents fix things. And now I know that some people won't be impressed by my dad's money or Brad's connections, Tank said, and I know that just because someone looks like they won't fight back doesn't mean they can't. Madison nodded. That's progress. But there's still something you're missing. What's that? You're still thinking about this in terms of what you can get away with. The real lesson isn't that some people will fight back. It's that you shouldn't be trying to take advantage of people in the first place. Tank hefted another heavy bag into position, his face scrunched in concentration. You mean like treating people with respect, even when we don't have to? Especially when you don't have to, Madison corrected. Anyone can be nice to people who have power over them. The measure of character is how you treat people when you think there won't be consequences. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of the evening training class, a dozen teenagers from the neighborhood who came in after school to learn boxing, wrestling, and basic self-defense. Madison watched as Tyler immediately went to help the younger kids get ready, while Tank hung back uncertainly. Go on, Madison encouraged. They don't bite. What am I supposed to do? I don't know anything about fighting. You don't need to know how to fight to help someone learn respect, discipline, and hard work, Madison said. Just be genuine and pay attention. These kids have excellent instincts about people. Reluctantly, Tank approached a group of middle schoolers who were struggling with proper push-up form. Within minutes, he was lying on the floor demonstrating technique, his natural competitiveness turning into encouragement for the kids to improve their own form. Madison smiled as she watched. The transformation, it wasn't complete. Tank still had a long way to go, but it was real progress. Not bad for someone who got his nose broken by a waitress, said a voice behind her. Madison turned to see Vincent Castellanos himself standing in the doorway. The restaurant owner was a distinguished man in his 60s, with silver hair and the kind of presence that came from building a successful business from nothing. Mr. Castellanos, Madison said, surprised, I didn't know you were coming by tonight. I wanted to see how your community service project was working out, he replied, watching Tyler patiently correct a young girl's stance. Dave Hernandez told me what happened that night, and frankly, I was impressed with how you handled the situation. I just did what felt right, Madison said. That's exactly why I'm here, Vincent said. How would you feel about a promotion? Madison blinked in surprise. A promotion? I'm opening a new restaurant next month, upscale, high-end clientele. I need an assistant manager who can handle difficult situations with intelligence and integrity. Someone who understands that good customer service doesn't mean letting people walk all over you. Mr. Castellanos, I appreciate the offer, but I'm not sure I'm qualified to... You took 3 entitled troublemakers who could have destroyed my business relationship with a major contractor, turned them into community volunteers, and solved the whole problem without anyone going to jail or filing lawsuits, Vincent interrupted. That's exactly the kind of problem-solving I need. Madison looked around the youth center, at Tyler teaching kids proper technique, at Tank actually smiling as he encouraged a shy boy to try harder, at the dozens of young people who came here every day to learn discipline and self-respect. "Can I think about it?" she asked. "Of course. But Madison, don't let anyone convince you that you have to choose between fighting and managing. The best leaders I know are fighters at heart. They just choose their battles carefully." After Vincent left, Madison continued her training routine, but her mind kept wandering to his offer. More money would mean better training camps, better nutrition, more time to focus on fighting. But it would also mean more responsibility, more stress, and less time for the things that actually mattered to her. "Thinking deep thoughts?" Tyler asked, appearing beside her as she worked the heavy bag. "Something like that," Madison replied. "How are you adjusting to all this?" Tyler glanced around the youth center. "Honestly, it's the best part of my week. My grades are better, I'm sleeping better, and for the first time in years, I feel like I'm actually contributing something positive to the world. That's a pretty big change from 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago, I was following Brad around like a lost puppy, making bad decisions because I was too scared to stand up for what I knew was right," Tyler said. "That night at the restaurant was the wake-up call I needed." "And Brad, how is he handling things?" Tyler's expression grew more complicated. "That's harder to say. He's doing the work here, and he wrote a really good apology letter to Mr. Castellanos. But I think he's mostly just trying to rebuild his relationship with his father. I'm not sure he really understands why what we did was wrong. What about you and Tank? Are you still friends with him?" "We're friendly," Tyler said carefully, "but I've learned that there's a difference between friendship and just going along with whatever someone else wants to do. Real friends don't pressure you into doing things that could ruin your life." Madison nodded approvingly. "That's a mature perspective." "I have a good teacher," Tyler said with a smile. "Speaking of which, Tank wanted me to ask you something, but he was too embarrassed to do it himself." "What's that?" "He wants to know if you'd be willing to give him some basic self-defense lessons, not to become a fighter or anything, just—" "He said he realized that night that he didn't actually know how to defend himself, and all his posturing was just covering up fear." Madison was genuinely surprised. "Tank wants to learn self-defense?" "I think he wants to learn confidence," Tyler corrected. "Real confidence, not the fake kind that comes from bullying people smaller than you." "And you? Are you interested in learning too?" Tyler shook his head. "I'm more of an academic type, but I've been thinking about maybe studying sports psychology or physical therapy, seeing how martial arts helps these kids with discipline and self-esteem. It's fascinating." As the evening training session wound down, Madison watched the young people clean up the gym with the same respect and attention they brought to their training. Tank and Tyler worked alongside them, no longer outsiders serving court-ordered community service, but actual members of the community they were serving. Brad appeared from the office, carrying a stack of updated membership files. He'd been quiet all evening, focused on his work, but not really engaging with the kids or the other volunteers. "How's the data entry going?" Madison asked. "It's fine," Brad replied. "Actually, it's kind of interesting. I've been tracking attendance patterns and correlating them with academic performance data from the schools. Some of these kids have dramatically improved their grades since starting here. That doesn't surprise me," Madison said. "Physical discipline translates to mental discipline." "Yeah, I'm starting to see that," Brad said. "Listen, Madison, I know my apology letter was pretty formal and corporate sounding. I wanted to say something more personal." "Okay. I've been thinking a lot about that night and about why I thought it was okay to do what we did. And I realized that I've spent most of my life in this bubble, where consequences only applied to other people, where money could fix any problem and connections could erase any mistake. And now Now I know that some things can't be bought or influenced away, Brad said. And more importantly, I'm starting to understand that they shouldn't be. If there are no real consequences for bad behavior, then there's no incentive to be better. Madison studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation or performance. But Brad seemed genuine, tired, humbled, but genuine. So what are you going to do with that knowledge? She asked. I'm not sure yet, Brad admitted, but I know I don't want to be the kind of person who uses privilege as a weapon against people who are just trying to do their jobs and live their lives. That's a good start, Madison said. As the three young men prepared to leave for the night, Marcus pulled Madison aside. You know, he said, I've seen a lot of community service volunteers come through here over the years. Most of them just put in their time and disappear, but these three are different. Different how? They're actually learning. Tyler's a natural with the kids. Tank is discovering that he's stronger when he builds people up instead of tearing them down. And even Brad is starting to understand that intelligence without empathy is just sophisticated selfishness. Madison looked at the three figures heading out into the night. Tyler chatting animatedly with Tank about something one of the kids had accomplished. Brad walking slightly apart, but not with the arrogant isolation he'd shown that first night. Maybe there's hope for them after all, she said. There's hope for everyone, Marcus replied. Some people just need a stronger wake-up call than others. As Madison gathered her things and prepared to head home, she thought about Vincent Castellanos' job offer, about her upcoming fight, about the three young men who had accidentally taught her something about the power of second chances. Sometimes, the most important victories weren't the ones that happened in the ring or the octagon. Sometimes, they were the quiet triumphs that happened when people chose to be better than they had been before. And sometimes, those victories started with someone refusing to back down when it would have been easier to just let things slide. 6 months later, Madison Torres stepped into the octagon at the Riverside Convention Center, the roar of 3,000 fans washing over her like a physical force. Her opponent, Jessica "Lightning" Rodriguez, was undefeated in 8 professional fights and had knocked out her last 3 opponents in the first round. The sports commentators had written Madison off as a tune-up fight for the rising star. But Madison wasn't thinking about the odds or the predictions. She was thinking about the journey that had brought her here, not just the years of training and sacrifice, but the night that had changed everything. In the VIP section, Vincent Castellanos sat with his business associates, proudly wearing a Team Torres t-shirt. As promised, he'd promoted Madison to assistant manager of his flagship restaurant, and the increased salary had allowed her to train full-time for the past 4 months. More importantly, the leadership experience had given her a new kind of confidence that translated directly into her fighting. A few rows behind Vincent, an unlikely group occupied a cluster of seats. Tyler Webb had driven down from his college campus, where he was now studying sports psychology and volunteering as a tutor for at-risk youth. Tank Morrison sat beside him, wearing the uniform of the local fire department. He'd dropped out of his business program and enrolled in emergency services training after discovering he actually enjoyed helping people in crisis situations. And in the corner of their section sat Brad Patterson, looking uncomfortable but determined to be there. His relationship with his father had improved considerably after he'd taken genuine responsibility for his actions. And Patterson Construction had eventually landed the contract with Castellanos Development. But Brad had surprised everyone by turning down a guaranteed position in the family business, choosing instead to start a non-profit organization focused on financial literacy education for teenagers. I still can't believe she invited us, Tanky said, adjusting his dress uniform. He'd been selected as Rookie of the Year by his fire academy and took his public appearance responsibilities seriously. She invited us because she understands something we're still learning, Tyler replied, that people can change if they're willing to do the work. Brad was quiet, his attention focused entirely on Madison as she went through her pre-fight routine. He'd learned to recognize the signs of true preparation, the calm focus, the controlled breathing, the way she seemed to exist in a bubble of concentration that nothing could penetrate. "She's going to win," he said suddenly. "How can you tell?" Tyler asked. "Because she's fighting for something bigger than herself," Brad replied. "Rodriguez is fighting for rankings and money and fame. Madison is fighting to prove that people like us, people from nowhere with nothing handed to them, can achieve anything if they're willing to work for it." Down in the octagon, Madison completed her warm-up and moved to her corner, where her trainer, Carlos Mendez, was making final adjustments to her game plan. "Rodriguez is going to come out aggressive," Carlos said. "She's used to intimidating opponents early and finishing them fast. But you've been dealing with bullies your whole life. What do you do with bullies?" "You show them that intimidation only works on people who haven't been tested," Madison replied, "shadowboxing with precise, controlled movements." "That's right. And if they escalate, you match their energy and exceed it," Madison said, her voice taking on the same steel quality it had possessed that night at the restaurant. "You make them realize they picked the wrong fight." The referee called both fighters to the center of the octagon for final instructions. Rodriguez bounced on her toes, trying to stare Madison down with the kind of aggressive posturing that had worked against her previous opponents. Madison simply listened to the referee's instructions with calm attention, her dark eyes never leaving. "Rodriguez's face. Touch gloves if you want to," the referee said. Rodriguez extended her gloves perfunctorily, but Madison could see the dismissive smirk behind her mouthguard. Another bully, Madison realized, someone who'd learned that aggression and intimidation were effective tools for getting what they wanted. This was going to be interesting. The bell rang, and Rodriguez immediately charged forward, throwing wild punches designed more to overwhelm than to connect precisely. Madison slipped and weaved, letting her opponent's aggression work against her, waiting for the right moment. It came 30 seconds into the fight. Rodriguez overcommitted on a right hook, leaving herself momentarily off balance. Madison stepped inside the punch, grabbed Rodriguez's wrist exactly the way she'd grabbed Brad's that night, and used her opponent's momentum to throw her to the ground with a perfectly executed hip toss. The crowd exploded as Madison immediately transitioned to ground control, pinning Rodriguez's shoulders while looking for a submission opportunity. But Rodriguez was a skilled fighter, not a drunk college student, and she managed to scramble back to her feet. "Come on!" Rodriguez shouted, trying to goad Madison into an aggressive exchange. "Fight me!" Madison smiled behind her mouthguard and resumed her patient, technical approach. She'd learned long ago that the most dangerous opponents were the ones who made you fight their fight instead of your own. For the next 4 minutes, Madison systematically dismantled Rodriguez's aggressive style. Every wild punch was countered with precise technical strikes. Every attempt at intimidation was met with calm professionalism. By the end of the first round, Rodriguez's face was swelling and her confidence was visibly shaken. "How's she doing?" "This," Tank muttered, watching Madison walk calmly to her corner while Rodriguez paced like a caged animal. "She's doing what she did to us," Tyler realized. "She's refusing to be intimidated, staying calm under pressure, and making Rodriguez fight on her terms instead of the other way around." In the second round, Rodriguez came out more desperate, swinging even wilder in an attempt to land a knockout punch. Madison continued her patient work, picking her spots, landing clean shots while avoiding most of Rodriguez's attacks. Then, midway through the round, Rodriguez made the same mistake Tank had made that night. She reached out to grab Madison in frustration, trying to muscle her around instead of using technique. Madison's response was swift and decisive. She trapped Rodriguez's arm, spun behind her, and locked in a rear naked choke with the same calm efficiency she'd shown in restraining Brad. Rodriguez struggled frantically for 15 seconds before tapping out. The referee stopped the fight, and Madison released the submission immediately, helping her defeated opponent to her feet with genuine respect and concern. As the referee raised Madison's hand in victory, the crowd erupted in appreciation for what they'd just witnessed. This hadn't been a lucky punch or a fortunate mistake. It had been a systematic demonstration of skill, patience, and mental toughness overcoming raw aggression. In the VIP section, Vincent Castellanos was on his feet cheering. He'd seen Madison handle difficult situations before, but watching her perform under the bright lights, with thousands of people watching, had given him even more respect for her character and abilities. "That's my assistant manager," he shouted. To anyone who would listen, a few rows back, Tyler, Tank, and Brad were also on their feet, their cheers mixing with the rest of the crowd's enthusiasm. "I can't believe we thought we could intimidate her," Tank said, shaking his head in amazement. "I can't believe she gave us a second chance," Tyler added. Brad was quiet for a moment, watching as Madison graciously accepted congratulations from Rodriguez and her corner team. "She didn't just give us a second chance," he said finally. "She taught us that we had the power to give ourselves a second chance. We just had to be willing to do the work." Later, at the post-fight celebration at Copper Creek Steakhouse, Madison sat at a table surrounded by friends, teammates, and supporters. The victory had earned her a title shot in 6 months, but more importantly, it had proven to herself that all the sacrifices and hard work had been worth it. Dave Hernandez approached the table with a special bottle of champagne, compliments of the house. "From all of us who were here that night," he said with a grin. "Who knew our quiet waitress was secretly a world-class fighter?" "I wasn't secretly anything," Madison laughed. "I was just someone trying to do my job and pay my bills. Everything else was just bonus skills." Tyler, Tank, and Brad had been invited to the celebration, though they'd initially hesitated to attend. Madison had insisted, explaining that redemption stories needed witnesses, and that everyone deserved to see where second chances could lead. "Can we get a picture?" Tyler asked nervously. "I mean, if that's okay. My little sister follows MMA, and she's not going to believe I actually know a professional fighter. Only if you promise to tell her the whole story," Madison said, "the good parts and the embarrassing parts." As they posed for photos, Tank found himself thinking about that night 6 months ago. "Madison, can I ask you something?" "Sure." "When you first grabbed Brad's arm that night, did you already know you were going to win this fight?" Madison considered the question seriously. "I knew I was going to do everything in my power to win. But the actual victory, that happened because of everything that came after that night. The training, the discipline, the confidence that came from standing up for what was right, even when it was difficult." "So beating us up made you a better fighter?" Brad asked with a self-deprecating smile. "Standing up to you made me a better person," Madison corrected. "Being a better person made me a better fighter." As the evening wound down and the celebration began to disperse, the 3 young men prepared to leave. They'd all found their own paths in the months since that night. Tyler with his studies and volunteer work, Tank with his emergency services career, Brad with his non-profit organization. But they'd remained connected by the shared experience of learning that actions have consequences, and that sometimes those consequences can be the beginning of something better. "Madison," Brad said as they prepared to go, "I know this might sound weird, but thank you for not letting us get away with it that night, for making us face what we'd done." "Thank you for being willing to learn from it," Madison replied. "That was your choice, not mine." As they walked out into the night, Tyler looked back at the restaurant where it had all started. "You know what's funny? 6 months ago, I thought this was the worst night of my life." "And now?" Tank asked. Tyler smiled. "Now I think it might have been the night that saved my life." Inside the restaurant, Madison was cleaning up the last of the celebration while thinking about the future. The title shot in 6 months would be the biggest fight of her career, but she wasn't worried about it. She'd already faced her toughest opponents, not in the octagon, but in a small steakhouse on a rainy Tuesday night when 3 bullies had tried to stiff the waitress and learned that sometimes the quiet ones fight back the hardest. Some fights you win with your fists, others you win with your principles. The best victories come from knowing the difference. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.